and I track this like every week, but I only graph a point of it every month. And you can see that, and for the first time, those that have seen my market updates before, I used to learn a lot about share trading, and I've decided to start combining my charting analysis that I used to do in share trading with looking at the property market indicators. And I haven't really seen anyone doing this, but it's actually helping me see the trend and where a trend breaks out of a particular direction, and I'll kind of point those out on the graphs, and hopefully you can see it as well. And the most important thing to notice with the market is that we don't want to look at a single point in time. Like a lot of the media always focuses on one single point. What we want to look at is the trend and the change in trend over time, because they quote changes from one month to the next. It doesn't matter if the median price is up that month, or the sales are up that month, or the supply is down that month. What we care about is what's happening over time, and does it change to be a solid trend. So with the sale market number for sale, this is one of the most important indicators, and you can see that we actually reached our peak of number for sale in recent times in and about here, so November 15. And over last year, we started to trend down, then we started to come up, and we've kind of just trending in this sideways band at the moment. And keep in mind that seasonally things change. So there's extra stock that comes on early January because it builds up over November, December, and then and comes on. There's more stock that comes on in spring because it's a great time to sell, and then there's less that comes on in winter and it's harder to sell. So at the moment, our supply started trending down in November. You can see here, down, down, down. We've had a little a minor upturn in March for the first time in 4 months, and you can see that we're very much within this sideways band. And what I'm looking for here is, like, over the next coming months, do we hit this and pop back down again, or if we ever cross back up above this, then we're going back the wrong way. So this kind of confirms my overall thoughts, and I'll go into some of the other indicators in a minute. But this confirms my overall thoughts that we're in a bit of a sideways market at the moment, and we're going to likely be there for 6 to 12 months before we see the market as a whole starting to, slowly rise. Now that's as a whole. There's always suburbs that are going better, there's always suburbs that are going worse, and then there's always suburbs that are going sideways. So you can see a few little stats on the bottom there. We've had an increase in supply since September of about 7%. We've had a decrease since last year. So I more look at the decrease compared to last year because that's the same season. So it's nice that we've had a 1.5% decrease, but nothing to get terribly excited fully about yet. Numbers sold. You can see that the numbers selling week on week had this steady decline over 2014, slowly, just moving down, and the trend was down. And in hindsight, it's a beautiful thing to notice that the market was, getting worse. And then we've very much gone sideways for this whole next period since July 15, because there's two sides to every market. There's the supply side, which I spoke about first, that's the number of properties for sale, and this is the demand side. So if we see supply coming down and we see demand coming up, that's when we see prices increase. So the encouraging thing for me is we actually had a breakout. In share trading, it's known as a breakout of the current trend. You can see that when we put a line along the tops of the peaks, we broke out in February, and March has confirmed that, and hopefully that'll continue. So that's very, positive news for the trend. We're certainly not in a new upward trend yet. We've got to keep an eye on it, but at least it's not going the other way now. very exciting for me. And when we look at our average days on market, you can see that it keeps bottoming out at this bottom point, and we've actually come down in the average days on market. So we were at 68 odd days, and we're now at 64 days. So we've had a marginal decrease over that last quarter. And again, I'll be curious to see whether this takes another little step up or whether it goes through that trend of increasing. So hopefully that'll start to also confirm what's happening with the number being sold each week. As more gets sold, the selling time will reduce and we'll start to see more pressure. So median house prices pretty much says it all. The graph of our trend, we've had an increase over the last quarter in the median house price as well. We're back up to 525. We were down to 500. 505. I think that is. Or 515. Sorry. We were at in the September quarter. And again, I'm going to be very curious to see whether that goes through this or whether it decides to keep going with its trend. Love the new trend lines. The biggest winners over the last year, and I guess the general perception amongst the public, is that nothing's growing, nothing's increasing. What happened in a lot of these higher end suburbs, you can see between 800 and roughly 1.1 million. All these suburbs had a big recovery last year because they did get hurt quite a bit in the preceding years, and people have started seeing them as value and they're rushing in, and that's where we've seen prices start to increase. So what happens as that demand happens is the people that are looking at Callaroo then start to become priced out. It's increased, the median's increased by 19% in a year, so they look to the neighbouring suburbs and they look for where they can afford them and for value, and that's where the ripple effect occurs because the demand then shifts to the neighbouring areas where there is more value. So you can start to map out all of these growth rates on a big map, and I have a lot of fun with it, and go deeper as to, okay, well this suburb hasn't grown in a while, it looks like value, and line it up with other predictors and what you know is happening, and then that's how I formulate my predictions for later. That was a quick summary of how I do it. So, in the units side, it's a similar story. These are a lot of the blue chip suburbs: Bayswater, Applecross, Fremantle, Burswood, Glendalough, Vic Park. All of them have had modest price percentage increases last year and have remained popular. So it's encouraging that people have still done quite well in those areas. Now, I'm just going to give you a quick update on the Perth rental market. You can see that the number for rent has actually started to trend down, thankfully. We reached our peak in September of last year, and the supply on the rental side is a leading indicator, and then it will start to show up in prices. It's the same with the sales market once out.
Is this vacancies? Number for rent is?
This is number for rent. So vacancies coming up. So you can see we've had a 5% decrease since September, but we've still had a 6% increase since March. When you look back at March for last year, we were down here, we had that rise up, and then we've started slowly coming back. So rental vacancy, thank you for prelude my next slide. You can see that continual up increasing trend that we've had, and then we've started to go sideways over this last 6 months. So I'm happy with sideways for rental prices, considering that 80% of my property business is property management, and we've hurt just as hard as all of our landlords with the dropping in rental prices, because that's a 15% drop in my revenue for last year. So stable is good, and we can work with that, and we'll obviously keep an eye on if this trend then jumps out to starting to go back the other way. And you can see that the median rent's also stabilised over the last 4 months and started to go flat. God, that's a steady decline there from our peak of 480 in median rent, we are now down to 360. So I should also note as a final thing, when you look at changes, that's just the overall market. Obviously your suburban areas of interest will be different and specific to that area. What we have seen as a general comment is the top end has generally been hit quite hard and now it's coming back. The bottom end has also been hit very hard and it's going to take longer to come back. That'll be the last to come back. And the middle has held out pretty good. And that's why with a lot of our buying criteria, we prefer to focus in that middle because we're the most insulated then. We're not getting exposed to the top end, we're not getting exposed to the bottom. So the property clock, it's really interesting to keep an eye on what's happening around Australia because we get lost in our little bubble of Perth and it's pretty hard to understand the growth and the gains that people have had in Sydney unless you go over there and into those markets. And thankfully I get to do that quite a bit because I go to a lot of conferences over there. One of my marketing mentors is over there, so I'm over there every 3 to 4 months. And it's just another world really. You know, they've increased from a median house price down here in 2012 of 540, sorry. In 2008 they were, 2012 they were down at about 580. They're now at $1,068,000. They've basically nearly had a doubling in the last 4 years. It's crazy, you know. Like anyone over there that had a property has pretty much become a millionaire. So it's hard for us to understand that, you know, like unless you see it firsthand. But we are always counter to Sydney, and what often happens, and what's happened in every preceding cycle, is they make their money, they make their gains, and then the investors move their money up to Brisbane, which they've already started doing. And as that market also picks up, then they've made their gains in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, then it flows around to Perth, counter to Sydney. So a lot of the media will be commenting on Sydney reaching its bubble and Sydney overpriced and, you know, all these things. That's all just Sydney. It's not us. And that's why the banks are tightening up lending, because they don't want, you know, they're pulling back their position to be more conservative, and their policy is really dictated by Sydney and Melbourne, the eastern states. They don't even really care about us over here. We should have a different set of policy to handle our market, and unfortunately for us, that increasing of rates is coming at a time when we're just starting to get our feet. So it'll have an effect on that. But you can only keep us down for so long, and back here in 2008, when we had our gain, you know, this crazy period of growth in here, when Sydney was flat, they were all like, what's going on? Like, why are we not getting growth? You know, what's wrong with our market? All the things that we feel, you know. So they were looking, and many of the smarter ones were over investing in us, and then it was their turn and we went sideways. So it's cool to see in perspective. So here's like the property clock. We have peak of the market up here. We have starting to declining, and we're at an approaching bottom. Some suburbs are starting to show better signs and increase. Others are still going down. And then we officially get classed as bottom of market. And this is done by Jarrad Mahon, and they're one of the biggest valuers, and I really trust their information. And most importantly, investors all around Australia trust it. So when something is said, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. So you can see that Brisbane's up here in its start of recovery, and Sydney is here, still rising market. I'd say that they're actually more up here. Gold Coast and Melbourne's already up there, approaching peak of market. So I guess as an investor, what we want to try to do is get in as close to the bottom as possible. It's always hard to know that we're there until it starts coming back up. But I understand that that's the hardest time to act, isn't it? It's when we're most fearful, it's when it's hardest to get money, it's when we've, you know, might not have certainty with our jobs. So if you can get through all of that, that's where the greatest opportunity comes, not when people are telling you at your barbecue, that's when we've reached the peak. You should be thinking maybe if you are going to sell anything, that's when you'd sell. The unit market, where we've got a lot more pain to go in units in Perth. And this is why we suggest primarily looking at houses and stuff with a larger land component, because the unit market is still in a declining market, and with the higher density still washing through, that's going to be another 1 to 2 years behind the housing market in its recovery. And that's very easy to see in all the stats. And Brisbane, interestingly enough, they've got such an oversupply in units that they're back where we are, and their housing market is around in starting its recovery and rising. So, you know, we're almost getting a two-paced market now between houses and units.